Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Israeli Prime Minister says the release of Gaza hostages is expected to begin by Sunday, as the country's security cabinet begins a meeting to discuss and vote on the highly anticipated ceasefire deal that aims to end over a year-long war with Hamas. Ukraine says it launched a missile strike on Russia's western Belgorod region, targeting air defense systems and damaging military radars as the country steps up cross-border attacks. North Korea warns of a stronger action against the joint military drills between South Korea, Japan, and the United States held this week. Pyongyang threatens to respond by exercising its right to self-defense more intensively. Nigerian troops kill 76 terrorists in the country's northeast during operations in various parts of Borno State. Army officials say the terrorists belong to Boko Haram and the Islamic State. And China's population falls for the third year in a row in 2024, with a decline of 1.39 million from the previous year. This as the country faces a rapidly aging population and persistently low birth rates. Hello and welcome. Our top focus today is on Sudan. The United States has accused the Sudanese army of using chemical weapons in its civil war against the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, or the RSF. This as it also sanctioned the country's military chief. As per reports, senior officials say the army has used chemical weapons on at least 2 occasions. The weapons were deployed recently in remote areas of Sudan and targeted members of the paramilitary RSF that the army has been fighting since April of 2023. But U.S. officials worry the weapons could soon be used in densely populated parts of the capital, Khartoum. The revelations about the chemical weapons came as the U.S. announced sanctions against the Sudanese military chief, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, for documented atrocities by his troops. Just a week ago, Washington also imposed sanctions on Burhan's rival, the RSF leader Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. The sanctions against the army leader are over war tactics that include indiscriminate bombing of civilian infrastructure, attacks on schools, markets and hospitals, and extrajudicial executions. Although the U.S. stopped short of alleging genocide, a charge leveled at the RSF, Washington has sanctioned the RSF over genocide claims. It alleged that the paramilitary and its allies have attacked civilians and systematically murdered men and boys because of their ethnicity. Both the RSF and the Sudanese army have denounced U.S. accusations. Sudan's army has called the sanctions immoral, adding that they lack the most basic foundations of justice and transparency. The army leader has struck a defiant note, saying he is ready to face all the sanctions while vowing to continue the fight against the rival paramilitary. The U.S. sanctions on Sudan leaders come just days before a change in government in Washington. The U.S., under the outgoing President Joe Biden, had steered clear of sanctioning the 2 leaders in hopes of a diplomatic dialogue. However, just 3 days ahead of leaving office, it expressed regret over the war in Sudan. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, hopes the incoming Trump administration will make efforts in this regard. The Sudan war erupted in April of 2023 as a power struggle between the army and the RSF. Over 10 million people have been displaced, thousands have been killed, while more than 24.6 million people, around half of Sudan's population, face high levels of acute food insecurity. A U.S. and Saudi-led diplomatic intervention succeeded only in securing limited humanitarian agreements. Meanwhile, multiple foreign nations like the UAE, Iran, Egypt, Russia and Ukraine are accused of fueling the war by providing support to the rival sides. The war continues to intensify, with attacks happening every single day, killing scores of civilians. With the warring generals remaining defiant, can the US sanctions make any difference? And will Sudan war end under Donald Trump's watch? For more on this, we are being joined by Patricia Rodriguez, who is a director at Control Risks Africa. She is joining us live from London in the United Kingdom. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, what evidence has emerged to support the claims that the Sudanese army used chemical weapons against the RSF? Excuse me. And what does this mean for the credibility of these allegations?
Sure. So far, the only evidence that has been put forward has been in that news article by the New York Times. Excuse me. And so far, we have not actually seen any other evidence that has been put forward. I should also emphasize that when it comes to the US sanctions notification, it does not in any way mention the use of chemical weapons. What the US has emphasized in its application of sanctions has been the indiscriminate targeting of civilians and the blocking of humanitarian aid. So that notification of sanctions does not actually mention the use of chemical weapons at all. This notion of the use of chemical weapons is primarily from the media, but I will also highlight that in the past, in 2016, Amnesty International had uncovered use of chemical weapons by the former president, the former regime under Omar al-Bashir. To date, we haven't actually seen evidence of that, but for a reputable media outlet such as the New York Times to be mentioning it, they must have some high-level contacts within the US government who have been offering them some sort of evidence on this. But publicly available evidence is not in the public domain at this point in time. To your question around what that means for potential humanitarian access. So far, the US has blamed both sides on restricting access to various areas of Sudan. And in fact, just a couple of days before the sanctions were announced, the Sudanese army had said that, or committed to being open to having humanitarian access into Darfur and securing a humanitarian corridor from Chad. Something which they had been very reluctant to do until recently. So it does seem that the sanctions are having the intended effect of opening up some humanitarian corridors.
Right. And Patricia, what legal or international mechanisms exist to hold the Sudanese army accountable for the alleged chemical weapons use? And what role could regional and global powers play in addressing this issue?
Ultimately, there does need to be more thorough investigations. So the likes of the UN and the International Criminal Court have already been involved in previous investigations into alleged war crimes in Sudan. So the international mechanisms are there via the UN Security Council, who can then refer the case to the International Criminal Court. There are currently two major obstacles here. The first being that the UN Security Council is currently divided in their approach to Sudan. There have been some vetoes by particularly Russia and China when it comes to making definitive statements on issues to do with Sudan. And then secondly, Sudan itself is not a member of the Paris agreement, which allows the International Criminal Court to have jurisdiction over it. So while the ICC is an option for investigations and, as you mentioned, accountability over the alleged use of chemical weapons, at this point in time, Sudan is not party to that accord. And it would require Sudanese authorities to be welcome for these sorts of investigations, for them to be able to be held accountable at the international level.
Right. Patricia, thank you very much for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights on all the latest out of Sudan.
Thank you.
From Sudan now, let us shift our focus to the eastern part of the continent. Uganda's king of controversies and President Yoweri Museveni's son is back in action on social media, and this time he has promised to shake up the world. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, who is also the head of Uganda's military, has reactivated his account on X barely a week after he quit the social media platform. In a post on the microblogging platform that was formerly known as Twitter, Kainerugaba had announced his return and said that he would shake up this world. The 50-year-old army general also ordered Uganda's security agencies to arrest on the spot any opposition figure who was found wearing anything that resembled the country's military uniform, and threatened consequences to those who did not respect his order. Now, Kainerugaba also went a step further and threatened to deport an unnamed U.S. diplomat, citing his reported failure to salute the general. He later said that all European defense attachés or military officials who represent their country's defense establishments were safe in Uganda. Now, Muhoozi Kainerugaba has been the head of Uganda's military since 2024. He is widely seen as his father, President Yoweri Museveni's successor, even as Museveni has reportedly denied that he is grooming him for the presidency. Kainerugaba is accused of sponsoring violence and abusing critics in Uganda. A popular keyboard warrior in the East African country, Kainerugaba is known to make inflammatory posts on social media platforms routinely, which critics say often touch on topics that are considered taboo for a serving soldier in the country. His latest return to social media has come just days after he had announced that he would quit X for the second time. In his post on the 10th of January, Kainerugaba had said that it was time to leave and concentrate on his military duties. This was after he sparked a controversy with a tweet in which he threatened to behead the country's leading opposition figure, Bobi Wine. Although the general reportedly apologized about the post, which he described as a joke, Bobi Wine said he could not take such threats lightly. But this is not the first time that the army general has quit and returned to social media platform. Now, in October of 2022, the Ugandan military chief stoked tensions and made headlines after threatening to invade neighboring Kenya, saying it would take his army only 2 weeks to capture the capital, Nairobi. Apologizing later, he said the comments about Kenya were made in jest. His comments led his father, the Ugandan president, to formally apologize and ask his son to stay off X. However, he returned days later and continued his social media outburst, which have sparked diplomatic tensions and controversies. Late last year, he posted 2 comments on social media where he threatened to capture Khartoum in Sudan with the support of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. This led Sudan to demand an official apology from Uganda over the offensive and dangerous comments made by the military chief. The posts were later deleted. Earlier, he also threatened to expel the U.S. envoy to the country if he did not apologize. It was not clear why Kainerugaba issued the ultimatum to the U.S. ambassador in October of 2024. The Ugandan government, which has been accused of repeatedly silencing and suppressing the opposition, has generally distanced itself from Kainerugaba's controversial posts and statements. The government has previously said that the military head's social media posts should be understood as casual comments and not taken seriously or as reflecting government policy. But as Uganda's popular keyboard warrior returns to social media, the question remains, will he continue to post controversial statements on X, or will he refrain from his outbursts on the platform and concentrate on his military duties? Let us now shift our attention to the Horn of Africa, where excitement is running high over Donald Trump's return to the White House next week. In Somalia's breakaway region, Somaliland, Many people are reportedly convinced that the United States, under the incoming presidency of Donald Trump, is poised to become the world's first country to recognize the self-declared republic. Reports suggest that many Somalilanders have called Trump their savior and are urging him to recognize Somaliland, which broke away from Somalia more than 3 decades ago. On social media platform X, some users have asked the incoming president-elect to reorganize Somalia and restore peace in the region, while others have called his return an opportunity to sway the international community in Somaliland's favor. Now, Somaliland had declared unilateral independence from Somalia in 1991. Strategically located along the Gulf of Aden, the territory has maintained relative stability and self-governance over the years. But the international community has not yet recognized the self-governing state. Somalia still considers the region as a part of its territory. Last year, landlocked Ethiopia struck a deal with Somaliland that irked Somalia. As per the deal, Ethiopia had agreed to a possible recognition of Somaliland's independence in exchange for a stretch of coastline for its naval base and commercial port. However, later that year, Ethiopia struck a peace deal with Somalia in Turkey, in which the landlocked country agreed to arrangements that would ensure access to the sea under Somalia's sovereign authority. Since then, Somaliland, which has said the deal with Ethiopia is still intact, has been looking to other countries to get international recognition. In December, reports suggested that Somaliland had planned to grant the United States a strategic base along the Red Sea coastline in a bid to persuade the incoming Trump administration to recognize the breakaway Somali territory. Currently, the U.S. has an air base at Abdel Fattah in northwest of Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, through which they have been conducting regular airstrikes against Islamist insurgents in Somalia. Additionally, the U.S. has also got a base in Djibouti, which is just north of Somaliland. A base on Somaliland's coastline would serve as a critical asset for the United States in countering Houthi threats to Western and Israeli vessels that are traversing through the Red Sea. It will also serve as a counter to growing Chinese presence in the region. And so, in recent months, some politicians from Trump's Republican Party have pushed for recognizing Somaliland. Last month, Congressman Scott Perry introduced a bill proposing formal U.S. recognition for Somaliland. Even during the first Trump administration, several officials working on Africa advocated for recognizing Somaliland, while also appreciated Somaliland's relation with Taiwan, another unrecognized self-governing territory in East Asia. Trump's decision to withdraw the U.S. forces from Somalia in 2020 was also interpreted by Somalilanders as a pivot toward a new Somalia doctrine in Washington. So, with Trump returning to the White House on Monday and Republicans getting back control of the House and the Senate, is Somaliland on the cusp of being internationally recognized? We will continue to get the updates on this right here on Firstpost. And for our last story today, we shift our focus to Morocco. The North African country is set to create history by becoming only the second African nation to host the FIFA World Cup. The country is in preparation mode as it will co-host the 2030 FIFA World Cup alongside Spain and Portugal. The massive sporting event is expected to build its economy and global reputation. However, Rabat is making headlines for some very wrong reasons. Reports say that Morocco is planning to kill 3 million stray dogs ahead of the World Cup to make cities nicer for fans. But many of these fans, who are also animal lovers, are outraged over the animal abuse. Watch our report for more details.
The FIFA World Cup, a sporting spectacle that unites football fans across the globe. With a recorded viewership of over 5 billion, it's the planet's most popular sporting event, taking place every 4 years and features several teams from around the world. The stakes are high and so are the emotions. Thrill, excitement, desperation, joy and tears. The World Cup invokes a plethora of sentiments. With the prestige associated with the competition, it's also a privilege for the host nations, which see it as an opportunity to build their reputation and economy. That's what millions of Moroccans felt when the news broke to them that their country would co-host 2030 FIFA alongside Spain and Portugal. Many saw it as an honor.
The news made us very happy. We are all sure that Morocco will be ready for that responsibility.
I am very happy, like other Moroccans, to host the World Cup in 2030 after multiple attempts. Finally, we made it.
But what was supposed to build Morocco's reputation is now making headlines for some very wrong reasons. Reports suggest Morocco is planning to kill 3 million stray dogs as it prepares to host the mega event. The North African nation has reportedly already killed thousands of innocent stray dogs. Animal activist organizations have revealed the brutal ways the country is using to execute its street cleanup. They claim stray dogs are poisoned with strychnine, a toxic chemical used as a pesticide to kill small animals like birds and rodents. They also say government-mandated gunmen are cruising Moroccan streets. They are shooting the dogs with rifles and pistols. Dogs are also hunted down and trapped with medieval clamping devices and thrown into the back of trucks. These dogs are taken to be killed in fake dispensaries. They are either burnt in incinerators or dumped in mass graves. Animal rights activists have written to FIFA's secretary alarming them about the large-scale killings. However, FIFA is yet to respond. While Morocco's mass killings of dogs is reportedly a plan to make cities nicer for fans, many of them are also animal lovers who've taken to social media to condemn the action. Some are calling it extremely heartbreaking, while some see it as a matter of shame for Morocco. The North African nation is set to become only the second African nation to host FIFA World Cup after South Africa. The country is already preparing by boosting its infrastructure. It's also building the world's largest football stadium in Casablanca, while also upgrading transportation networks to meet FIFA standards. But if all this comes at the cost of brutal animal abuse, is that what Morocco's historic FIFA World Cup would like to be remembered for?
And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again at the same time on Monday. Have a great weekend. Thank you for watching and goodbye.